Trying to grow plums, are ya? Now, plums are a fantastic fruit, especially if you live in slightly cooler climates, typically a sort of golf ball and a little bit bigger shaped fruit, and they're really, really delicious. And what I really love about plums is they're very productive. Usually what you do is you plant them, and within sort of 4 or 5 years they'll start producing, and then they're very heavy croppers. Now, what I've tried to do in this video, I actually made a video 2 years ago about growing plums. Who are you calling a plum? And I planted in that video a plum tree, a 2-year-old plum tree, which I had grown on from a whip. I'd actually bought some grafted little whips, basically like a twig with a root on them. So I'd already at that stage grown them on for a couple of years, and then I did the video of me planting one of them, and it's actually been 2.5 years, because it was the autumn before. So this is its 3rd year in the ground, and I just want to show you, I've got my first bunch of fruit which have set this year on the other one. I planted 2, but the one in the video is a bit smaller, but I'll show you that they're still, you know, approaching large bush tree size. So at the end of the video, tell me if you think that that has helped, and leave some comments below. But this is good, because you're going to see a sort of 4 or 5 year cycle to fruiting. They're not very fussy, but anything that's going to be in the ground for a long time, prepare your planting hole as you would any tree that you want to do well. So dig down, make sure that it's got good root run, and try and penetrate that sort of cap layer down under the ground, and try and give it a good run for the roots, you know. They will get big, and one thing I'd say about plums is you've got to train them. You can train them into any shape you want. What I'm going to do with mine is I'm going to bend down the long sort of branches that are going too high, and I'm going to bend them down and hook them down with wire, and then I'm going to eventually end up with a sort of weeping system with the thicker stems, and I'm going to prune them back every year so I get a bit of shape out of them. Because what I'm doing with the plums is I'm trying to grow them up in areas where the apple trees are a bit thin, and just trying to get a little bit of light. But you're going to prune, because otherwise they'll just turn into a massive bush. They're quite a wild plant by nature. You get the odd stem on them that looks like a real long thorn, and that's because they're bred from Prunus spinosa, which is a typical hedgerow plant in the UK. It's known as the slowberry bush. You end up with these white, like a purple small plum, basically, and you bite into it, and then you have to go and wash your mouth out because it's absolutely disgusting. But no, you use it for flavouring gin, and some people use it for other things. But you know, you're going to do well with them. And what they say is, if you're going to plant your plums, try and plant a couple of varieties, because even though things like Victoria, the one I planted there was Victoria, typical, very well cropping one in the UK, is that they can. It's still good to have another type. I've got a cherry plum on the other side of which isn't quite established yet, just for pollination purposes, just to make sure you get all the fruits set in one go. It will sucker from the bottom, so prune out your suckers. Don't want any suckers in your bottom. I wouldn't prune it in autumn, winter. Try and prune it in spring, just before it leaves out, because what can happen is it's quite soft fruited, and you can end up getting disease if it's in a very wet condition, very wet area. I mean, one of the problems I had was the deer come and nibble the bark, and I'll show you that, but that's something you might want to think of if you have deer in your area. This is the damage the deers have done. Now I'm going to have to wrap that in one of them young tree protectors. You know, you probably will have to thin your trees out. These are really good trained up against a wall, or if you're prepared to do a bit of pruning and get the shape you want, they're a great thing for that. Another thing I would say is use them for a hedgerow. You know, if you're going to put in a hedgerow, people put all these hedgerows in at the minute, and honestly, you know, if I had originally come here from the beginning and planted this, it would be full of nuts and plums and all sorts of stuff. You know, Crataegus monogyna, the hawthorn is what they usually, but you know, that's another thing you want to think about. Boundaries, things like that. You want to cover bad areas, you know, and you've got a long-term vision. 5 years time, you can, if you prune it above a fence, you can have that, and you can get fruit out of it as well. Something for you to think about, you know. And You can make wine with them. Some of the best wine I've had is plum wine, and really good for chutneys and desserts, and they're really versatile. Can't stress it enough, plums. And you're going to get a lot if you put a couple of trees in, so you want to plan before you plant. If you think you're only going to have the odd plum, think again. But yeah, so there is some other information in this video. I'll flick back. I don't know what I was doing with the filming in that one. That you can barely see me, I'm in the pitch black, but if you can put up with that, that's fine. I would try and avoid growing them where there's a frost pocket, any low-lying areas, or anywhere too boggy where the frost can get in, or it's just too boggy for them to grow. They like an open, sunny site really, but I find in the forest garden, that sort of intermediate zone between the trees and the perennial shrub layer, they do very well. Now what I do with plum trees is I like to buy them bare root and grow them on. This is an example of that, what I've done here. I buy the sort of whips, the young bare root plants, and I grow them on. I usually get a pack of 10, usually cost me about 15-16 pounds. Put them in a 10 litre pot, and then grow them on for a year. Get them strong, get them filling up the pot, and then plant them into their final positions. I mean, not only is it more economical that way, I just like doing that way. I like to grow things from a young plant and watch them develop, see how healthy and strong they are, than getting something big that perhaps is just going to sit there for a couple of years and perhaps not be happy. That's the route I like to go. And what I'll do now, this is a cherry plum, so this is a very nice sweet plum. Looks like a cherry, very red colour. I've got a 2-year-old plum that I grew on like this, called Victoria. Victoria is a very popular variety, produces very good plums, very prolific plant. So I'm going to take you over there and have a little look at that one. Right, so here it is. This is the 2-year-old plant now. This is its 3rd year coming on now. Grew this from a bare root plant like you saw over there. It's really quite a resilient plant now. So this year I'm really hoping for it to get going. It should do really well. I've grown this on the edge of the woodland garden, so I'm hoping to get maybe another year, maybe some fruit out of it, and then, you know, it should give me that good interconnective zone where the larger trees and the shrubs and the parking bay, there's a bit of sun there for it to harness and to perhaps give me some fruit. That's what we're trying to achieve. But plums, really great if you've got a small garden. Keep them pruned, open site, sunny site, well drained, and you shouldn't go wrong. And in 2 years' time, you'll have something like that. So this is the plum tree that I planted in that video. It's looking very nice, and it's doing very well. I haven't actually got many fruit on this one this year. I've only got a couple which have set, but it doesn't quite look ready, but it's looking good. To give you some perspective, this is where the angle I planted it at a couple of years ago. It's actually a little bit restrained here root wise. It's next to the drive in quite a dry area, but it's still, you know, it's with a little bit of training, that's going to look beautiful, and it's going to give us loads of fruit. And just at the back of my van there, growing up tall, that's the 2nd one I planted, and that's in a bit more of a better position. So as you can see, I mean, you know, we're approaching sort of 10 foot tall there. I mean, most people, if you told them you were going to grow it from a whip, from a twig, and then 5 years later you'll get fruit, they'd say, come on, you know, it's a little bit of a long wait. But the fact is, to show you that I did, there's you know, a 4-year process, but most of the time you'll be buying these trees when they're larger, a sort of standard tree, not much smaller than what I've got behind me. So you could hope to get fruit within 3 years. There's a good one. You almost see it's got quite an interesting form. It's a plant you can do a lot with and train very well. It's good raw material if you want to make, if I could pull some of them branches there down one that way and make a great frame there as well. So I can't tell you how excited I am, to be fair, about that. So there you have it, plum trees. They're a great fruit, they're not too fussy, they're a bit of a pre-investment. You have to make sure you plant them sort of at least 3 years before you're planning on having fruit. But if you grow them on and you have a 4 or 5 year plan, if you're trying to cultivate a large area, you can do this very, very cheaply. So I would certainly recommend going for plums. Loads and loads of fruit, a great joy in the garden, can be trained into any form. Get out there and grow some.